The rain fell like bullets against the pavement, each drop exploding into 1,000 smaller pieces that seemed to mirror the fragments of Sarah's broken heart. She clutched her 4-year-old daughter Emma closer to her chest, feeling the child's small body shivering through the thin blankets that had once been white but now bore the stains of their harsh reality. The cardboard beneath them had turned to mush hours ago, and the cold concrete of the subway entrance offered no comfort, only the bitter reminder of how far she had fallen. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm that raged both outside and within Sarah's soul. "I know, baby. I know," Sarah replied, her voice cracking as she pressed her lips to Emma's damp hair. The words felt like glass in her throat because she had no answer, no solution, no hope left to offer. The last of their money had gone to Emma's medicine 3 days ago, and since then, they had survived on the kindness of strangers and the scraps from restaurant dumpsters. Sarah closed her eyes and let the tears flow freely, mixing with the rain that had already soaked through every layer of their meager clothing. She had been a nurse once, had owned a small apartment with yellow curtains that Emma loved to peek through. That was before the medical bills from Emma's chronic condition consumed their savings, before Sarah lost her job due to too many missed days caring for her sick child, before the eviction notice came like a death sentence wrapped in legal jargon. The sound of expensive leather shoes against wet concrete made Sarah look up through her tears. A tall figure stood before them, partially obscured by the shadows of the subway entrance. She instinctively tightened her grip on Emma, having learned that late-night encounters with strangers rarely brought good news for women in their position. "Mom, are you all right?" The voice was gentle, concerned, and carried an accent that spoke of private schools and boardroom meetings. Marcus Chen had been heading home from another 18-hour day at his tech company, his mind consumed with quarterly reports and acquisition deals. When he saw them, the sight stopped him cold. Even through the rain and darkness, he could see the woman's tears, could hear the quiet sobs she tried to muffle against her child's hair. Something deep within his chest twisted painfully, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a boy watching his own mother count coins to buy groceries. "We're fine," Sarah lied, not looking up. She had learned that eye contact invited either pity or predation, and she wasn't sure which would be worse. Marcus knelt down slowly, his $1,000 suit soaking up the dirty water without a thought. Up close, he could see that the woman was probably around his age, maybe younger, but her eyes held a weariness that spoke of battles fought and lost. The little girl in her arms had the pale, fragile look of chronic illness, and Marcus felt his heart break a little more. "My name is Marcus," he said softly, "and I don't think anyone should have to sleep in the rain tonight." Sarah finally looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. She saw genuine concern there, not the calculating look she had come to expect from men who approached her. Still, trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. "We don't need charity," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew how hollow they sounded. "I'm not offering charity," Marcus replied, surprising himself with the words. "I'm asking if you'd like to stay somewhere warm and dry tonight. No strings attached, no questions asked. Just humanity." Emma stirred in Sarah's arms, opening her eyes to look at the kind stranger. "Are you an angel?" she asked with the innocent curiosity that only children possess. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who believes everyone deserves a safe place to sleep." What Marcus didn't tell them was that he had built his fortune from nothing, starting with a food truck outside this very subway station 15 years ago. He had slept in doorways and eaten day-old bread, had felt the crushing weight of uncertainty and desperation. Success hadn't erased those memories, it had simply allowed him to forget them until this moment. Sarah studied his face in the dim light from the street lamp above. Something in his expression reminded her of her father, who used to say that you could tell everything about a person's character by how they treated those who had nothing to offer in return. "Why?" she asked simply. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair as he searched for the right words. "Because someone showed me kindness when I needed it most. Because that little girl deserves better than this. Because—" he paused, his voice catching slightly. "Because I used to be where you are now, and I remember what it felt like to believe the world had forgotten I existed." The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge neither had expected to find. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a tiny crack in the wall she had built around her heart. "Just for tonight?" she asked, and Marcus heard the desperate hope she tried to hide. "Just for tonight," he confirmed, though already he was thinking beyond tonight, already planning how he might help them rebuild rather than simply survive. Marcus helped them to their feet, noticing how unsteady Sarah was, how Emma seemed almost weightless in his arms. His car was warm and dry, a stark contrast to the hell they had been living in. As they drove through the city streets, Emma fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder, and Sarah allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in months: safe. The hotel suite Marcus brought them to was more luxurious than any place Sarah had ever stayed, even in her previous life. But what moved her to tears wasn't the marble floors or the king-size beds, it was the simple fact that Marcus disappeared for 20 minutes and returned with children's clothes in Emma's size, warm soup from a nearby restaurant, and medicine for Emma's condition. "How did you know?" Sarah asked as she watched him pour soup into a bowl, his expensive suit sleeves rolled up, treating this simple task with the same attention he might give a billion-dollar merger. "I recognize the symptoms," he said quietly. "My nephew has the same condition. I know how expensive the medication is." As Emma slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Sarah and Marcus sat in the living area of the suite, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them as they shared their stories. Sarah learned that Marcus had been homeless for 8 months as a teenager after aging out of foster care. Marcus learned that Sarah had once saved lives as an emergency room nurse, that she played guitar and sang lullabies, that she had sacrificed everything for her daughter without a moment's hesitation. "What happens tomorrow?" Sarah asked as the first hints of dawn began to creep through the curtains. Marcus had been asking himself the same question all night. He could give them money, could solve their immediate problems with a simple bank transfer. But he had learned that true help meant more than just financial assistance. It meant restoring dignity, purpose, and hope. "Tomorrow," he said carefully, "I'd like to offer you a job. My company needs a medical liaison for our employee wellness program. The salary would be more than enough to get you back on your feet, and the health insurance would cover Emma's treatments completely." Sarah stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "You don't even know if I'm qualified." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all night. "I spent 4 hours talking to you. I know you're overqualified. The question is whether you'd want to work for someone who found you crying in the rain." Sarah looked over at Emma, sleeping peacefully under clean sheets, her cheeks pink with warmth instead of pale with cold. She thought about the yellow curtains they had once had, about the dreams they had been forced to abandon, about the possibility of dreaming again. "I'd like that very much," she whispered, and for the first time in months, the tears on her face were tears of joy rather than desperation. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the lobby of Chen Technologies, wearing a professional blazer and carrying a briefcase, watching employees file past on their way to lunch. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the subway entrance where Marcus had found them, where their lives had changed in the span of a single conversation. Emma ran up to her, released from the company's on-site daycare for lunch, healthy and laughing and full of the boundless energy that had been stolen from her by hunger and fear. "Mommy, Mr. Marcus says he's taking us to see the new apartment after work," Emma announced, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Sarah smiled, thinking about the 3-bedroom place they had found, with yellow curtains already hanging in Emma's room. It wasn't charity, she had learned, when someone gives you the opportunity to earn your own second chance. Marcus appeared from the elevator, his tie slightly crooked from a morning of meetings, and Emma immediately ran to him for the hug he had become famous for among the staff. Watching them together, Sarah marveled at how naturally kindness seemed to flow from him, how he had somehow managed to become both Emma's protector and her friend. "Ready for lunch?" he asked, and Sarah nodded, gathering her purse and Emma's backpack. As they walked towards the exit, Marcus caught sight of their reflection in the lobby's polished floors. A successful executive, a talented professional, and a happy child are 3 people whose lives had intersected in a moment of mutual need and created something beautiful from something broken. The rain had stopped that night 6 months ago, but the kindness that began in that storm continued to ripple outward, touching everyone it reached. Sometimes, Sarah thought, the most extraordinary miracles begin with the simplest human decision to see another person's pain and choose to help carry it. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to say, "Stay here tonight," to change the entire trajectory of a life.